Someone asked me if I could do a video on parents who are narcissists, so today's video is going to be about just that. The whole subject on narcissism is rather new in the sense that it wasn't a subject that people were searching for back in the day. All we knew regarding narcissism was some loudmouth braggart who always wanted to be the center of attention. And although back years ago we had people who were in fact self-absorbed and lacked compassion, it certainly wasn't as prevalent as it is today. However, with the changes over the years we've had with things like human rights, which isn't to say that this was a bad thing, it was just taken out of context. Then social media with selfies and likes, along with the stresses of overwhelming bills where people can't make ends meet, and divorces leaving children feeling rejected, even if sometimes it wasn't even intentional because the parents were just overwhelmed and distracted. We are now here in this mess trying to figure out how to get over the traumas that this has left us with. And so we search. We Google, we search YouTube, buy books, trying desperately to figure out if narcissism is the issue and how to handle it. More so, a lot of times we want to find information that can tell us if for sure the other is a narcissist. And although we are going to get into all of the characteristics to help us identify, we still cannot determine if they literally have NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. But no one can classify that unless they are healthcare providers, usually a psychiatrist or psychologist. And even for those who have narcissists as partners, it can take years sometimes to be able to identify. So before we begin with the telltale signs, I want to say this. Does it really matter whether someone has narcissistic personality disorder or has high levels of narcissism? The bottom line is that someone didn't or isn't treating you right and it's affecting you. The bottom line is that you are probably here to heal or set some stronger boundaries, and you don't need my permission to do so. Boundaries aren't about trying to control a situation regarding stopping someone from doing something. That's control over another. Boundaries are a line that we draw to protect ourselves, not control another. So if, for example, someone is constantly belittling you, you don't keep telling them to stop over and over again, expecting them to stop, because first of all, if they are indeed a narcissist, they won't stop. You draw the line in letting them know, expecting them to stop, yes, but if they don't, you do what you need to do to prevent it from happening to you again. For example, you might walk away from the relationship or at least back away substantially. It's not about punishing them. It's all about protecting you. If you had a child who was slapped every time that you left them with a sitter, you wouldn't continue to take them to the sitter, would you? You would do what you would have to do to protect the child. You wouldn't keep telling them to stop over and over and over again. And the same goes with you. So, without further ado, let's start with the signs, and then we'll move on to things that you can actively do to protect yourself, and we'll also look at ways to heal from trauma so that you can move your life forward in a positive light. So here are some common signs of narcissistic parenting. Grandiosity. Narcissistic parents often have an inflated sense of self-importance and may exaggerate their achievements, their talents, or their abilities. They expect special treatment and admiration from others. Mind you, there are what we call the grandiose narcissists, who would be the loud, obnoxious types, and then we have the vulnerable or the covert narcissists. But regardless the subtype, all types do have an inflated sense of self. They will feel offended if you don't adhere to their every need. They'll demand respect without ever feeling the need to respect anything that you have to say about anything. They'll often hold grudges and pout or give you the silent treatment and nods of or sighs of disapproval if you aren't putting them on a pedestal or if you have a different opinion. Then these would most likely be the covert narcissists that would do this. The grandiose will just blurt out what they think without taking into account how they use their words or even embarrass you in public, which can further traumatize the individual. Lack of empathy. Narcissistic parents typically have difficulty empathizing with the emotions and needs of their children. They will dismiss or minimize their children's feelings and experiences, focusing instead on their own needs and desires. So if the child wants to go to a specific college or want to become a social worker rather than a doctor, that is irrelevant to the parent, even though it challenges the whole dynamic of that person's future. What matters is how the parent feels. And often the parent will feel the need to be acknowledged by society and how they are viewed as parents. So if, for example, the neighbor's son is going to Harvard, then their child should also. And aside from things like schooling, the parent will say cruel and hurtful things to the child and never apologize. They might tell the child that they'll never amount to anything, or tell them that they're disappointed in them. But regardless of what they say, they will treat the other in hurtful manners and never be accountable for the damage that they do. They won't acknowledge the pain that they've inflicted. They just don't acknowledge others, period. Even if it's their birthday, or if they're graduating, or if they need to talk about something that's bothering them at school, for example. If the child tries to address an issue, the response is something like, "Get over it, life is hard," or "What did you do?" insinuating that the child was the cause of the issue. Then we have the manipulative behavior. Narcissistic parents may use manipulation tactics such as guilt tripping, gaslighting, or emotional blackmail to control their children and maintain power and dominance within the family dynamic. Gaslighting is common with a narcissistic parent. They'll tell the child that they're too sensitive or they're overreacting, making them feel ashamed for the feelings that they're experiencing. They might promise something to the child, and when the time comes for these promises to be held up, they'll say that they never said that. When it comes to guilt tripping, the parent might tell them that they're being selfish for having wants or needs, and they'll somehow turn everything around and make everything about them. The child grows up afraid to ask for anything in fear of appearing selfish and end up putting everyone else's needs above their own. They can also use emotional blackmail, such as withholding love. Emotional blackmail can be a manipulative tactic used to control others through fear, obligation, and guilt. Statements such as, "I should have never had children," or threatening to place the child elsewhere are some forms of emotional blackmail, and it is damaging to one's sense of self. Then we have sense of entitlement. Narcissistic parents often believe that they are entitled to special privileges and preferential treatment. They may demand unquestioning loyalty and obedience from their children, viewing them as extensions of themselves rather than individuals with their own autonomy. The child, now an adult and living apart from the parent, still feels obliged to stop everything that they're doing in order to satisfy the whims and wants of the parent. They're grown adults still feeling that they owe everything to said parent. Critical and controlling behavior. Narcissistic parents may be excessively critical and controlling, micromanaging their children's lives and choices to meet their own standards and expectations, like I mentioned regarding school. They may withhold love and approval unless their children conform to their demands. They might use statements such as, "I'm your mother and I'll always be your mother." Next we have parentification. In some cases, narcissistic parents expect their children to fulfill emotional or caretaking roles typically reserved for adults. And this can lead to reversal of parent-child roles, with children feeling responsible for meeting their parents' needs. And oftentimes what ends up happening is that the child becomes codependent, feeling that they have to be responsible for everyone. And in some cases we have unpredictability. Narcissistic parents may exhibit erratic or unpredictable behavior, making it difficult for the children to anticipate their moods or reactions, and this can create an environment of instability and anxiety within the family. The child is constantly stressed and walking on eggshells, never knowing what to expect. Exploitation. Narcissistic parents may exploit their children for their own gain, whether it be through seeking admiration and validation from their accomplishments, or using them as pawns in their own personal agendas or conflicts. They might take away the children's belongings like money or vehicles if their child is older. Idealization and devaluation. Narcissistic parents may oscillate between idealizing their children as extensions of themselves and devaluing them when they fail to meet their expectations or challenge their authority. And this can create a cycle of praise and criticism that leaves children feeling confused and insecure. This can create a trauma bond where the child is always doing more just to get a cookie crumb. And lastly, we have lack of boundaries. Narcissistic parents often have poor boundaries, intruding into their own children's personal space, their thoughts and their emotions. They may disregard their children's privacy and autonomy, treating them as possessions rather than individuals with their own rights. So with all of this, we have the effects on the children. Growing up with narcissistic parents can have profound and lasting effects on children's emotional, psychological, and social development. Children of narcissistic parents often experience a range of negative consequences, including low self-esteem, constant criticism and validation, and conditional love from narcissistic parents can undermine a child's sense of self-worth and confidence. Emotional instability. Living in an environment characterized by unpredictability, emotional volatility, and lack of empathy can lead to heightened anxiety, depression, and mood swings. Difficulty forming healthy relationships. Children of narcissistic parents may struggle to establish their own boundaries, trust others, and communicate effectively in relationships regarding to issues with intimacy and connection. Perfectionism is another one. The constant pressure to meet unrealistic standards set by narcissistic parents can instill a perfectionist mindset in children where they feel compelled to excel in all areas of life to gain approval and validation. Role reversal, what I just mentioned, where the child is forced into the role of caregiver or a surrogate spouse, taking on adult responsibilities and sacrificing their own needs to meet the demands of the narcissistic parent. Coping with narcissistic parenting can be challenging, but there are strategies that children can employ to mitigate the negative effects and protect their well-being. Number one, establish boundaries. Setting clear and firm boundaries with narcissistic parents is essential for maintaining autonomy and protecting one's emotional health. This may involve limiting contact, asserting oneself assertively, and refusing to tolerate abusive behavior. Number two, seek support. Building a support network of friends, family members, or mental health professionals, if you can provide validation, empathy, and practical advice for coping with narcissistic parents. Don't think that you have to go through this alone. And number three is practice self-care. Engaging in self-care activities such as exercise, mindfulness, and creative expression can help children manage stress, regulate emotions, and cultivate a sense of self-compassion. Keep in mind that this isn't you, it's them. This has nothing to do with you and all to do with them. Remember that you are enough and that you do matter, regardless of how they want you to feel. You want to develop a sense of identity. Fostering a sense of self separate from the narcissistic partner's expectations and demands is crucial for building resilience and self-esteem. Define your values. Values are things that are important to you that determines your happiness and peace. We need values to survive if we want to be happy or if we want to live in peace. Study emotional literacy. Grab a list of emotions and go down your list every time that the narcissist makes you feel bad. And what you're doing there is you're acknowledging the self, which is the very thing that the narcissistic parent hurt you with, never acknowledging you. And journal. Don't forget to journal. That right there is self-care. And lastly, if you can, seek therapy. Working with a therapist who specializes in narcissistic abuse can provide invaluable support and guidance for processing trauma, healing emotional wounds, and developing healthier coping strategies. Healing from narcissistic parenting. Healing from the wounds inflicted by narcissistic parenting is a gradual and ongoing process that requires patience, self-reflection, and commitment to personal growth. And some key steps in the healing journey include: acknowledge the abuse. Recognizing and validating the emotional and psychological abuse inflicted by narcissistic parents is a crucial first step towards healing. And this can involve confronting painful memories, emotions, and beliefs that have been suppressed or minimized. Grieve the loss. This one is big. Coming to terms with the loss of the idealized parent-child relationship that never existed can be a painful but necessary part of the healing process. Allowing oneself to grieve the absence of love, nurturing, and validation from the narcissistic parent is essential for moving forward. Reclaim your autonomy. Reclaiming one's autonomy and agency through the influence of narcissistic parents is empowering and liberating. And this may involve asserting boundaries, making independent choices, and prioritizing one's own needs and desires. In other words, learn to say no. No is a full sentence. And then say yes to you. Cultivate self-compassion. Developing self-compassion involves treating oneself with kindness, understanding, and acceptance, especially in the face of self-doubt, shame, and criticisms instilled by the narcissistic parenting. You want to use affirmations to combat the awful programming. So if they made you feel as though you were unlovable, start to repeat affirmations that you are lovable and deserving. And lastly, don't give up on self. Know your worth. Many times it's those who experience the darkest times who end up shining the brightest lights. So I hope this talk has been able to help some of you out there who perhaps needed to hear this. So let me know by clicking a like and perhaps subscribing. And also don't be shy with the comments, as comments can help others see that they aren't alone in this. I am wishing you a great week, and we shall see you in the next video. Bye for now.